Just start to clear your mind, letting go of any thoughts or feelings you may be bringing into your practice today. If your mind starts to wander, just acknowledge your thoughts and then tune your attention back in to your breath. Take note of the texture of your breathing. Is it smooth and silky, or is it shallow and choppy? Just try to consciously deepen each of your inhales and fully empty your lungs on your exhales. Just take a few more moments here to connect with your breath. Focusing in on your lungs as they expand out to the sides, and as your belly hollows out. On your next inhale, extend your arms overhead, stretch out through your toes. Take a big morning stretch. Maybe wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe circle your ankles and your wrists. Just start to waken up your body. And come back to stillness. Pause here for a moment. And then slowly start to walk your feet over towards the right side of your mat. You have the option to cross your left leg over your right, and then slowly start to arch your body over towards the right side, bringing your arms over to the right. Maybe place the left hand over the right hand, stretching out through the left side body. Take a few deep breaths here. And then slowly walk your hands and your feet back to center. Maybe stretch out through your fingers and your toes once more before walking your feet over towards the left side of your mat, maybe crossing your right ankle over your left, bringing your arms over to the left side of your mat. You have the option to place your right hand in your left. Feel the stretch in your right side body. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. And walk your hands and your feet back to center. You can stretch out through your fingers and your toes, and then hug your knees into your chest. Maybe rock side to side if that feels good for you. And then extend both feet up towards the sky, stretching out through your legs. You can begin to point and flex your toes. You can circle your ankles in one direction and then the other. Separate your feet wide. Bring your legs into a wide V. You have the option to place your hands on the inside of your thighs, or you can place them on the outside of your thighs for added support. Feel the stretch in your inner thighs. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And bring your legs back to center. Cross your right leg over your left leg like you would be seated in a chair. And then hug both knees in towards your chest. Your hands can clasp the outside of your left shin. Hug your knees in. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And release your hands. Extend both feet back up towards the sky. Cross your left leg over your right like you're seated in a chair. Go ahead and hug your knees in towards your body. Place your hands on the outside of your right shin. If this is uncomfortable for anyone, you have the option to just come back into legs up the wall, or you can come back to lying down on the mat. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. Feel the stretch in your left outer hip. Go ahead and release your legs. Extend both feet up towards the sky. Slowly start to drop your left foot down towards the mat. Hug your right knee into your body. Give your right leg a nice hug in. And keep your left hand on the outside edge of your right knee. Extend your right arm out to the side. Slowly drop your right knee over towards the left side of your mat. Gaze over your right shoulder. Come into supine twist. Again, you have the option to stay in legs up the wall, or you can come onto lying on your mat, maybe coming into morning stretch if this is uncomfortable for you. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And bring your right knee back to center. Stretch it out long. Hug your left knee in towards your chest. Give yourself a nice hug here. Keep your right hand on the outside of your left knee. Stretch your left arm out to the side. Slowly start to drop your left knee over towards the right side of your mat. Gaze over your left shoulder. Come into supine twist on the second side. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And slowly come back to center. Hug both knees in towards your chest. And make your way up to a seated position. Go ahead and flip over, come into tabletop or hands and knees. Make sure your wrists are in line with your shoulders, knees are in line with your hips. Come into neutral spine. And then slowly start to turn your gaze over towards your right hip, squeezing into your right side. And then come back to center. Start to gaze over your left hip, squeezing in on your left side. And come back to center. Go ahead and gaze over your right hip. And come back to center. And one more time, gaze over your left hip. Come back to center. Stretch your right foot out behind you. Pause here. And then slowly start to walk your right foot over towards your left side of your mat. Gaze over your right heel. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. We're here for 2 more cycles of breath. And walk your right leg back to center. Bring your right knee back down to meet your left. Stretch your left leg behind you. Take a moment to pause here. And slowly start to walk your left foot over towards the right side of your mat. Bring your gaze over to the left heel. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. Make sure your weight is evenly distributed between your hands. And bring your left foot back to center. Bring your left knee back down to meet your right. Bring your knees out wide, big toes together, sink your hips back, bring your forehead down to the mat, come into child's pose. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. Extend your right arm overhead, thread it through. Bring your right cheek down to the mat, gaze over your right fingers. Feel the stretch in your right shoulder. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. And bring your right arm back out to meet your left. Sink your hips back. Pause here. And extend your left arm overhead, thread it under your body, bringing your left cheek down to the mat. Feel the stretch in your left shoulder. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. And start to stretch your left arm back out to meet your right. Sink your hips back, come into child's pose. Take a moment to pause here. And slowly rise back up to tabletop. Bring your elbows down to the mat, forearms down on the mat, palms down on the mat. Tuck your toes under. Slowly lift your hips up and back, come into dolphin pose. Take a moment to settle in here. Maybe stretch out your calves by coming up onto your tippy toes and trying to sink your heels lower. Maybe play here for a moment. Pause in the middle. Slowly walk your feet back towards the back of the mat. Come into a low plank. Tighten your glutes. Tighten your quads. Engage the core. Pause here. And then slowly walk your feet back up to dolphin. Walking them in towards your body. Stay here for 2 more deep breaths. And lower your knees down to the mat. Untuck your toes, come back to tabletop. Ground down through your right palm and your right knee. Step your left foot back, extend your left arm overhead. You have the option to stay here, or you can lift your left leg up off the mat to hip level. Looks good. Stay here for 3 more deep breaths. Engage your core. And go ahead and lower your left hand back down to the mat. Keep that left leg raised if you lifted it. If not, you can go ahead and lift it now. You can pause here. You have the option to stay here, or you can extend your right arm out in front of you, coming into spinal balance. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. Tighten your core. And go ahead and lower your right hand down, left knee down to the mat. Come back into tabletop. Ground down through your left palm and your left knee. Step your right foot back behind you. Extend your right arm overhead. Again, you have the option to stay here, or you can lift that right leg off the mat, bringing it to hip level. Engage your core. Find your drishti if you need a focal point. And if you have that leg extended up, go ahead and bring your right arm down to the mat. Close your hip. Keep that leg lifted. Option to stay here or extend your left arm out in front of you. Coming into spinal balance. Stay here for 3 more deep breaths. And go ahead and lower down to tabletop. Bring your knees out wide, big toes together, sink back to child's pose. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And slowly rise back up to tabletop. Place your right foot between your hands. Tuck your left toes, lift your left knee off the mat. Go ahead and heel toe your foot back to the back of your mat. Lower your left knee down, untuck your left toes. Come into low lunge. Bring your hands to your hips, rise up. Slowly extend your arms overhead. Go ahead and interlace your fingers. Pointer fingers can be pointing towards the sky. Inhale, take a deep breath in, growing tall through the crown. And on your exhale, start to melt your heart forward. Lift your gaze towards the ceiling, up over your fingers, bending slightly through your back. You should feel a deep stretch in your left hip flexor. Stay here for 2 more cycles of breath. And slowly rise back up. Release your hands, keeping them overhead. And then slowly bring your hands back down to frame your front foot. Start to sink your hips back, straighten that right leg, bowing over your right leg. Come into runner stretch. Feel the stretch in your right hamstring. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And slowly start to bend into your right knee. Tuck your left toes under. Lift your left knee off the mat. Ground down through the palms of your hands and step back to down dog. If this is your first down dog of the day, you can go ahead and come up onto your tippy toes, maybe sink your heels lower, maybe pedal your feet out. Take a moment to do what you need to do here. And then lower your knees back down to the mat, come into tabletop. Go ahead and place your left foot between your hands. Tuck your right toes under, lift your right knee off the mat. Start to wiggle your right foot back. Drop your right knee down, untuck your toes. Start to rise up, come into low lunge, extend your arms overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Go ahead and interlace your fingers, point your fingers pointing towards the sky. On your inhale, grow tall through the crown. And on your exhale, start to lift your heart towards the sky. Gaze over your fingers. Come into a back bend. Stay with me for 3 more deep breaths. Root down through that left foot. Find your balance. And lower your hands back down to frame your front foot. Slowly start to sink your hips back, straighten that left leg. Bow over your left leg. Come in to runner stretch. Soften into the stretch in your left hamstring. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. And then slowly start to bend into that left knee. Root down through the palms. Lift your right knee off the mat. Step back to down dog. Take a moment to pause here. And then lift your right leg high in the air. Thread it through for low lunge. Root down through the soles of your feet. Slowly rise up to high lunge. Extend your arms overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Grow nice and tall through the crown. Engage your core. Take notice of that back foot. Make sure the heel is straight up. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And then anchor your left heel down. Bring your arms parallel to the mat. Come into warrior two. Gaze over your right fingers. Stand strong through the legs here. Flip your front palm. Slowly start to extend that right arm overhead, left arm down the left calf. Come into reverse warrior. Gaze up over your right fingers. Soften into the stretch in your right side body. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And then slowly come back up to warrior two. Start to straighten your right leg, keeping a micro bend in your right knee. Start to hinge at your hips. Bring your hand down to your right shin, to the floor, or to a block if you have one. Gaze up over your left fingers, left arm overhead. Stack your shoulders. Shine your heart towards the sky. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. Slowly start to bend into your right knee. Root down through the soles of your feet. Slowly start to rise up, come back into warrior two, gazing over your right fingers. Pause here. And slowly windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Step back to plank. You have the option to take a vinyasa here, or we will all meet in down dog. If you're following along, slowly lower all the way down, untuck your toes, hands are rooted down under your shoulders, slowly start to peel your heart off the mat, squeezing your shoulder blades together. You can come into cobra here or up dog if that's in your practice. Take a pause here. And then lower your heart back down to the mat. Tuck your toes, push back to down dog. Take a moment to pause here. And then extend your left leg high in the air. Thread it through for low lunge. Root down through the soles of your feet. Slowly rise up to high lunge. Extend your arms overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Grow tall through the crown. Tighten through the midline. And slowly start to anchor your right heel down. Bring your arms parallel to the mat. Come into warrior two. Gaze over your left fingers. Rooting down through the soles of your feet. Flip your front palm. Reverse your warrior. Gaze over your left fingers. Try to reach that right hand further down your right leg. Stretching out through the left side body. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And then come back into warrior two. Start to straighten your left knee. Hinge at your hips. Extend your left hand down to your shin, the mat, or a block. Right arm stretches overhead. Stack your shoulders. Come into Trigonosana, triangle pose. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And slowly bend that left knee. Anchor down through your feet. Rise up to warrior two. Take a pause here. And windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Step back to down dog. Walk your feet towards your hands, hands to feet, forward fold. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle sweep arms to sky. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Take a moment to pause here. Start to lift your right knee up towards your chest, rooting down through your left leg, your standing leg. Hug into the midline, hug in through the core. Find your drishti and slowly start to hinge forward. Extend your right foot behind you. Your right foot can be flexed or pointed. Come into warrior three. Your hands can stay at heart center, or you can extend your arms out in front of you. Root down through that standing leg. Take a few moments. Find your balance and stability. And then slowly lower your hands down to the mat. Kick that right foot up towards the sky. Come into standing split. Pause here. Kick that right leg higher in the air. And then lower your right foot down to meet your left. Bow forward. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle sweep arms to sky. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Ground down through your right leg. Extend your left knee in towards your chest. Hug into the midline. Find your balance. Find your focal point. Slowly start to hinge forward. Kick that left foot back towards the back of your mat. Come into warrior three. Again, your left foot can be flexed or pointed, and hands can be at heart center or stretch out in front of you. Hug your hips in. Feel strong through that standing leg. We're here for a few more slow, deep breaths. And slowly lower your hands down to the mat. Kick that left foot high in the air. Toes pointing down towards the mat. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. Try to kick that left foot higher in the air. And then lower it back down to meet your right and bow forward. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle sweep arms to sky. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Inhale, circle sweep arms to sky. Exhale, swan dive forward. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle sweep arms to sky. Exhale, hands to heart center. Bring your big toes together. Leave a little space between your heels. Slowly start to sink your hips back. Come into chair pose. Hands can stay here at heart center. You can extend them out in front of you, parallel to the mat, or overhead in line with your ears. If your arms are overhead, just make sure your shoulders are melted away from your ears. Stay here for 3 more deep breaths. Feel the heat build in your thighs. Stay with me. And slowly bow forward. Release. Plant your palms down. Step back to down dog. Take a moment to find your breath. Inhale, lift your right leg high in the air. Exhale, thread it through for low lunge. Ground down through the soles of your feet. Slowly rise up to high lunge. Arms extend overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Pausing here. Anchor your left heel down. Bring your arms parallel to the mat. Come into warrior two. Gazing over your right fingers. Flip your front palm. Reverse your warrior. Gaze up over your right fingers. And slowly come back to warrior two. Bend your right elbow. Place your right forearm on your right thigh. Extend your left arm overhead. Option to stay here, or you can drop your right hand down to the mat or take a bind if that feels good for you. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. And then slowly rise back up to warrior two. Windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot. Spin off your back heel. Step back to plank. Again, you have the option to take a vinyasa here, or we will meet in down dog. So lower down, come into cobra or up dog, push back to down dog. Pausing here. Extend your left leg high in the air. Exhale, thread it through for low lunge. Ground down through the soles of your feet. Slowly rise up to high lunge. Extend your arms overhead, shoulders away from the ears. Pause here. Start to anchor your right heel down. Spin your arms open, parallel to the mat. Come into warrior two. Flip your front palm, reverse your warrior. Gaze up over your left fingers. And slowly come back up to warrior two. Bend your left elbow, place your left forearm on your left thigh, extend your arm overhead or in line with your ear. Come into extended side ankle. Option to drop your left hand down to the mat or take a bind. Stay here for 3 more cycles of breath. And slowly rise back up to warrior two. Pause here. Windmill your hands back down to frame your front foot, spin off your back heel. Step back to down dog. Pause here. Walk your hands up to, or your feet up to your hands, hands to your feet, forward fold. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle, sweep, arms to sky. Exhale, hands to heart center. Bring your big toes together, little space between your heels. Slowly start to sink your hips down, come into chair pose. You have the option to stay here, or you can inhale and bring your left elbow to the outside edge of your right thigh, coming into a chair twist. Option to keep your hands here at heart center, or extend your right arm overhead, left arm down towards the mat. If your hands are at heart center, push your palms together. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. And release, bowing forward. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, circle, sweep, arms to sky. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Bring your big toes together, little space between your heels. Slowly sink your hips down, come into chair pose. Again, you have the option to stay here, or inhale, grow tall through your spine. And on your exhale, hook your right elbow on the outside edge of your right thigh, your left thigh. Gaze up to the left side. Option to bring your hand down to the mat, extend one arm overhead, or keep your hands here at heart center. Stay with me for 2 more cycles of breath. And release, bring your hands to the mat, bow forward. Inhale, hands to shin, spine long, halfway lift. Exhale, fold forward. Place your hands back down on the mat, step back to down dog. Take a moment to pause here and lift your right leg high in the air. Exhale, bring your right foot to the outside edge of your right hand. You have the option to stay here or lower your left knee down to the mat, untucking your left toes. Option to stay here or drop your elbows down to the mat or a block if you have one. Come into lizard pose. You can keep your right knee hugging in towards your right shoulder, or you have the option to roll over onto the outside edge of your right foot, splaying your right knee out to the side. You find what works for you. Stay here for 5 slow, deep breaths. Try to invite your breath in to ease any discomfort you may be feeling, any resistance. And if you lower down to a block or to the mat, come back up onto your hands. Tuck your left toes under, lift your left knee off the mat, step back to down dog. Take a moment to pause here. And then extend your left leg high in the air. Exhale, bring your left foot to the outside edge of your left hand. Again, you have the option to stay here or drop your right knee down to the mat, untuck your right toes, and you can also bring your elbows down to the mat or to a block if you have one. You find what works for you. We're here for 5 slow, deep breaths. Invite your breath into any resistance you may be feeling in this pose. Try to tune into your breath. Soften in. If you drop down to your elbows, go ahead and come up, rise up onto your hands. Tuck your right toe under, lift your right knee off the mat, step back to down dog. Lower your knees down to the mat and slowly rise up onto your knees. You can bring your hands to your hips. Stay nice and tall. Place your palms of your hands on your sacrum, right above your glutes. If you have a shelf there, you can just place your hands. Squeeze your elbows in towards each other, opening through your heart. Slowly start to push your hips forward. Sink your head back. Come into camel pose. Option to stay here or drop your hands down to reach for your heels. Maybe release your neck back. Take a few moments to breathe here. If you dropped your hands to your heels, place them back on your sacrum. Rise back up. Come back up to standing on your knees. Extend your right leg out to the side. Toes can be pointing towards the long side of the mat or the short side. Slowly start to walk your right hand down your right leg and extend your left arm overhead, bringing it in line with your ear, stretching out through your left side body. Take a few moments to breathe into the stretch here. And then slowly start to lower that left hand, bringing it down to the mat. Extend your right arm overhead, bringing it in line with your right ear. Gaze up towards the ceiling. Take a few slow, deep breaths here. Bring your right hand to your right hip. Slowly rise back up. Tuck your right knee in to meet your left. Extend your left leg out to the side. Toes can be pointing towards the short side or long side of your mat. Slowly start to walk your left hand down your left thigh, down your calf, and extend your right arm overhead, bringing it in line with your ear. Feel the stretch in your right side body. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. Slowly start to rise up. Bring your right hand down to the mat. Extend your left arm overhead in line with your ear. Gaze up towards the ceiling. Stay here for a few slow, deep breaths. And bring your left hand down to your left hip. Slowly rise back up. Tuck your left knee in to meet your right. Come back into a seated position. Knees can be pointing towards the sky. Soles of your feet are grounded down on the mat. Slowly start to sink your shoulders back, engage your core, bring your shins parallel to the mat, come into boat pose. Hands can be extended out in front of you. Tighten through your core. Stay here for 3 more slow, deep breaths. Looking good. And lower your feet back down to the mat. And slowly lower all the way down. Come into a supine position. Place your hands next to your hips. Make sure your ankles are in line with your knees. Ground down through the soles of your feet and slowly lift your hips up towards the sky. Tighten through your glutes, come into bridge pose. You have the option to interlace your fingers behind you, squeeze your shoulder blades together, opening through your heart. Make sure your hips are lifted towards the sky. Stay with me for 5 slow, deep breaths. And go ahead and release your hands, walk your shoulders out, and slowly lower your hips down to the mat. You can windshield wiper your knees from side to side if that feels good. And go ahead and come back to stillness in the middle. Ground down through the soles of your feet. You have the option to do just as we did, or you can come into a restorative bridge if that feels good for you today, or you can come into wheel if that's in your practice. Go ahead and prepare yourself for whatever option you're taking. If you're following me, ground down through the soles of your feet. Slowly lift your hips up. Squeeze through your glutes. Clasp your fingers together behind you. Walk your shoulder blades in together. Lift your hips up towards the ceiling. Squeeze your glutes. Root down through the soles of your feet. Stay with me for 5 slow, deep breaths. And release your hands, walk your shoulders out, and slowly lower all the way down to the mat. Go ahead and windshield wiper your knees from side to side. And come back to stillness in the middle. Hug your knees into your chest. Maybe rock side to side if that feels good. And then go ahead and extend both feet up towards the sky. Hands can be down by your hips. Palms can be facing up. Come in to legs up the wall. You have the option to stay here, or you can take any inversion you would like. If plow is in your practice, shoulder stand, headstand, go ahead and do what you would like to do, or you can stay here. If you'd like to take a more restorative approach, you can place a block under your sacrum or put your legs up a wall. Whatever you choose to do, stay with me. Focus in on your breath. We're here for 5 more slow, deep breaths. And go ahead and hug both knees into your chest. Maybe rock side to side. If that feels good for you, maybe reach around and grab for the outside edges of your feet or your hamstrings. Come into happy baby. Take a few moments here to connect with your breath. And at this time, if there's anything you need to do to complete your practice, I invite you to do so. When you're ready, hug your knees into your chest and find your way into Shavasana. Maybe extend your feet out to the outside edges of your mat, letting your toes flap out to the sides. Removing any tension points that you may be feeling. Relax your shoulders into the mat. Flip your palms up. Close your eyes and tune into your breath. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel the weight of your body resting against the mat. Melt into the mat. Soften in through your eyes, through the space between your eyes. Relax your jaw and your mouth. Relax your tongue. Soften your neck and your shoulders. Soften your upper arms. Relax your elbows and your chest. Soften your forearms, your wrists. Relax your fingers. Relax your hips and your thighs. Relax your knees. Soften your calves. Relax your ankles and your feet. Relax your toes. Relax any part of your body still holding on to tension. Slowly start to deepen your breath. Maybe start to wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe extend your arms overhead, coming into a morning stretch. Or hugging your knees into your chest. Before making your way over to your side. Pause here. And make your way up to a seated position. Close your eyes and bring your hands to heart center. Take a moment to honor yourself for showing up, practicing, taking a pause from your busy lives to just find a moment for yourself on your mat to connect with your body and your breath. I hope you have a very peaceful day. The light in me sees and honors the light in each one of you. Namaste.